Is 12.5 million rands too much to pay for someone to write your autobiography? Or is it immaterial if you're a billionaire? Let's have a conversation. I don't know if you've been following this, but the former mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, and the leader of the Action SA party had a book that was released about him, an autobiography, unauthorized, so the cover of the book said. And that unauthorized autobiography was written by the political analyst Prince Mashele. So it was on the shelves. Now it has been withdrawn, but it turns out that this book was actually not an unauthorized autobiography after all. It was a sponsored autobiography. And one of the people who was a researcher in the deal, Brutus Malada, who's a friend of the political analyst Prince Mashele, actually spilled the beans and said, listen, I got paid 3 million rands to participate in this. This is not an authentic unauthorized autobiography, and it was covered by the Sunday Times and several other publications. And then the publisher then said they're going to pull the book from the shelves because they were misled. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that Professor J.J. Tabane asked Prince Mashele about how he funded the book. And Prince basically said, he's a consultant, he's a fundraiser, he's a businessman, and he can make it happen. This is what he said.
It looks like a very extensive piece of work. I mean, did the publisher simply pay you to do it, or did you have to raise funds to do this?
No, look, this is not the first book I've written, by the way. I believe it or not, I fund my own books. How do I fund my own books? I'm a consultant. I work.
Yeah.
So I raise money to do intellectual work. This book was funded like that. I funded my own project.
So Mashaba was not involved in the fundraising?
No, Mashaba was not involved in the funding of the book. I funded the book myself. Yeah. Here is the thing. The way I do my work, I consult, I do many other things, I raise money, this and that. I pick up intellectual projects that fascinate me. The reason why I do so is because I do not want people to pull strings and tell me what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So I write whichever books I feel like. The fall of the ANC, there was no funder behind it. I funded it myself. This, no funder behind it. I funded it myself.
So to comment on this, the first question really was all of this necessary? The unauthorized autobiography, the secrecy and everything. Prince Mashele is a respected political analyst, or maybe he's not as respected as he was after this whole scandal, but he's a respected political analyst, and he could have said he's doing this project and it wouldn't have mattered that it was funded in part by Herman Mashaba. It wouldn't have been a big deal. In fact, many autobiographies have been written by people with collaboration. The autobiography of Malcolm X was told to Alex Haley, and it's one of the best literary works of the last 100 years by rankings. And it's a brilliant book, but it wasn't written by Malcolm X. It was written by Alex Haley. Now, this whole approach, I think, was harmful to both the brands of Prince Mashele as well as the brand of Herman Mashaba, because it looks a bit thirsty, it looks a bit desperate. Like, why do you need this unauthorized status? Just tell us your story, and if your story is compelling, people will support you and understand you and why you were doing the things that you're doing. You don't need to have an unauthorized autobiography to make it credible. For example, the Steve Jobs autobiography, which was written by Walter Isaacson, everybody knew that Walter Isaacson worked with Steve Jobs to do that autobiography. And even though he didn't have editorial control, he was actively collaborating. Now, the question, I guess, would be the funding element. And this is Africa, so people don't have as many funding options as they would have in America for writing this kind of a book. So it could make sense if you said, Herman Mashaba is also paying for some of this because it's a book in his name. So it wouldn't have been an issue. What has become the issue is the secrecy and the lies. Now, the other question that comes from this is, what long-term damage will this do to Prince Mashele, the political analyst? Because he is going to be participating or looking to participate in conversations about, the next election in 2024. What does it mean for that analysis when you took 12.5 million rands from one of the political candidates? That surely will just corrode any credibility that you have, or perhaps at least it now allows people to know that whatever analysis you are giving, you do have that funding mechanism, and perhaps anything that you say is coming from a viewpoint that is sponsored. In America, it's often known what journalists are affiliated to. Sometimes people who come in to give commentary are from think tanks that lean to one particular party or another. So maybe this is actually quite healthy to have this level of disclosure in the political circles. The last thing is just to discuss this idea of the autobiography as a political tool or a communications tool. Do autobiographies work? I think that they do work. I think that it's important for political leaders to tell people their story, bring people into their personal lives, and help people understand their motivations, their reasons, etc., etc. I think Barack Obama's Dreams from My Father was a very powerful book. I think Bill Clinton's My Life was a very powerful book, although it was written, I think, much later in his political career. And there's others out there that I think are instructive in helping people understand what drives that particular politician. Obviously, in South Africa, there's a bit of an issue because what makes a bestseller on the bookshelf is about 5,000 sales. But sometimes you can break through that 5,000 sales barrier and sell a whole lot more. And I think a political window is one of the periods in time where people may be interested to hear, what does this person have to say? Maybe you sell 10,000, 20,000. But if that book is read by people who are in your donor community and people who are in areas where they have influence, those 10,000 books can actually expand your reach much further. Some books have broken through the barriers. I think that Spud series was one of the most successful books on the South African shelves. I think sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Other books, international books, I'm calling them international, but they're not necessarily international, like Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, that also has sold quite phenomenally, and it's subject matter about a South African, obviously, but it was published, I think, in America, but then republished here in South Africa as well. So books do have a place, but a lot of people were just thinking, because of the low level of book buyership in South Africa, this may not have been the best return on investment or the best investment at all by Herman Mashaba to spend 12.5 million rands for maybe a guaranteed readership of 5 to 10,000 people. And the people who think this then say, what does this say about his judgment? One, that this whole mess happened. What does that say about his judgment about choosing the people to work with? And number two, the fact that he spent that much money as an initial cost or investment on this particular project. What does that say about him?